But we got a big show lined up for you today. Dennis Prager from Prager University will join us to talk about the left's war on fathers. We'll also continue with our Wokeness Unraveled week. Plus, with the world's attention focused on coronavirus for the past year, have you let the rest of your health go unchecked? Pathologist Dr. Reed Spalding will join us to talk about the health consequences of a year under lockdown. And I was just in Texas for the NRB Christian Media Conference. I'll share some of my interviews with you later in the show. But we begin tonight with discussing the crime wave rocking our country. In Chicago alone, there were 801 homicides between June 18th of last year and today. Countless names, countless families who no longer have their sons, their daughter, their mother, their father, their friends. 11 of those victims have been under the age of 10. It is just heartbreaking to see them. And more than 500 were between the age of 18 and 35. Chicago has some of the toughest gun laws, by the way, in the country, and yet 801 people lost their lives to gun violence this past year. And of course, Chicago is not tragically alone in this. Compared to last year, homicides are up 12% in New York City, 58% in Atlanta, 81% in Minneapolis, and get this, 533% in Portland. Joining us now is Jason Johnson, former Deputy Commissioner for the Baltimore Police Department. He is now the president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. Also with us, retired Navy SEAL and former FBI agent Jonathan Gilliam. Jonathan is the author of the Sheep No More series. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here.
Good to be with you.
All right, Deputy Commissioner, I'm going to start with you. You know, as America, we have been known as a civil society, much because we have laws and there are consequences for those laws when you break them. But when those laws no longer have consequences and they're not enforced, why would you stop what you're doing? For some reason, the left seems to think that there can be no consequences and people will behave. But we're seeing that is not the case with some of those numbers that I just read to you. Where do you feel like the disconnect is for people to understand that right now?
Well, the biggest thing is you hit the nail on the head. It is a breakdown in the fabric of orderly society in our cities. And I think it's a combination of police officers being defunded, disempowered, really not having the ability to do their job in the way that requires in the way that is required in order to reduce crime and reduce disorder. Also, a wave of prosecutors have been elected in many of those cities that you pointed out, that their philosophy is to avoid prosecuting people, which, of course, is what prosecutors do. But they've taken a role much more like a public defender would or an elected social justice warrior. And it's really those two things, the inability to properly staff police departments, disempowerment of police, massive retirements, by the way, that in addition to the crime numbers, police departments are experiencing massive retirements and the inability to bring new candidates in the door.
Yeah, we are seeing people step down left and right. And because they're not respected, they're not being empowered to do their job. You know, I can only imagine how tough things are for them right now. But Jonathan, something I've noticed lately is that when the left talks about cities, they talk about public safety. They don't want to talk about being tough on crime. However, to have public safety, you have to be tough on crime. Otherwise, you're not going to have a safe environment. Do you think the narrative needs to shift a little bit across the aisle for hopefully Democrats to get on board?
You know, as Jason can tell you there, the reality with all of this increase in crime is not that all of a sudden more criminals have appeared. It's not as though there's more gangs out there or that there's more guns on the street. The reality is because of the systematically created breakdown. This isn't something that just happened. You know, society didn't just break down. It's this systematic breakdown by the left as Jason pointed out there a second ago, of the prosecutors, of not backing the police officers. All these different things that have occurred has been systematic, and that's actually what's increased the crime. It's not something that is just out of proportion. The black market for guns and guns on the street and gun violence, it didn't increase because guns became more available. Those illegally trafficked guns have always been available. And this is the problem that we're facing, is that not only are good cops leaving because of this, but less qualified officers are being brought onto the job, and they're given more stringent requirements to follow that do nothing to allow the policing and stopping of actual crime. It just appeases the left and this strange ideology that they have.
And why join the police force right now if you're a good candidate? Because why would you want to go into a job where you're completely disrespected all the time? You're harassed. I mean, I can't imagine that's very enticing. But, Commissioner, I do want to switch to your city of Baltimore, because businesses in the city are now threatening to withhold tax revenue from Baltimore unless they get more policing. Is this the right approach, do you think?
Well, it certainly got the leadership of the city's attention, I'll tell you that. It is a part of the city, Fells Point, which is an economic engine for the city. It's a tourist area. It's a place where young people go to restaurants and bars and things. It's typically been a very safe part of the city, but it's experienced an enormously increased level of crime and disorder, not just crime, but people defecating in the streets, open containers of alcohol, open drug use, and things like that. And it did get the city leadership's attention. I think with some renewed focus by the police department, they can get it under control. But it's not going to turn around until the city sees a real commitment to holding people accountable for committing acts of violence, for committing, acts of disorder that tear at the fabric of an orderly society. And that's really what's driving all this.
Yeah. Jonathan, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot said last week that racism is a public health emergency. Those numbers that I read to you earlier, 801, 633 of those people were Black who were killed by homicide. So health is important, but what is killing the Black community is also crime. Do you feel like statements like that, one, are helpful, but two, if we have Democratic mayors like this, I don't feel like it's going to get safer anytime soon?
Listen, that statistic is very important. And in fact, now in June, in Portland, for instance, it's no longer 500% increase. It's now a 900% increase in crime. But what you just showed there is very important, because where these things are occurring is in the Black community. But what do mayors like Lightfoot talk about, or de Blasio in New York City, or governors like the criminal Cuomo talk about? They talk about white supremacy and Asian hate crime, where Asians are being attacked. And as you saw there, the numbers don't support what they're saying. It's not a white supremacy problem. Even the DOJ is getting this completely wrong, because that's what they want to push out, and they want people to think. The problem here is that the Black community in the inner city is used by the Democrat Party to do their bidding. That is what they use to show that, oh, there's oppression, or these people are downtrodden, there's no hope for them. At the same time, they allow this madness to occur in there, because they don't crack down on illegal gun sales. They don't crack down on gangs and drug violence. And instead, they make it more opportunistic, like in Chicago, where if somebody comes up and steals a purse in front of a police officer, they cannot chase that person unless they know there's more than $400 in the purse. Now, how is an officer supposed to determine that? And they've just put all these people in harm's way in that area, because that's what they use as their shtick. That's their platform, and that's how they fool, or try to attempt to fool, the nation.
Right. You look at this map of these cities who have defunded the police. Your city of Baltimore is on there, Commissioner. Chicago, New York. And as you see what's happened to these cities, I mean, I've read the stats here. We're talking about the stats. Do you think that it would be wise for some of these police departments to step up and have almost a PR campaign, because the left has put them as villains, as these bad people? Would that be helpful, or who needs to step up to switch the narrative on policing, Commissioner?
Well, unfortunately, it really has to be led by the labor organizations that represent these officers, and by nonprofits. I run the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. That's part of what we try to do, is to show the narratives that are being pushed by the left are wrong. The narratives about police, the narratives about police use of force. Excellent point there about the the primarily this increase in violent crime, it really falls on the Black community. That's really who are being victimized much more than they were in the past. It's not so much a problem that you see increasing in the white community. So while the mayors and the leaders push this notion that there's systemic racism, really, if you want to come up with an example of systemic mistreatment of minorities, it's the lack of political will to respond to massive increases in violence in the Black community, turning a complete blind eye to it. And that really needs to be known more widely. And that's certainly we try to get the facts out on that. And I think really the labor organizations that represent police officers have to do it, because these city police chiefs are under the thumb of the mayors. They have to toe the company line. They're not allowed to step out of line and get the facts out. So that's really who has to push it.
Lindsay, can I say one thing about that? Can I say one thing?
I don't have much time, but go ahead, please.
I completely disagree with Jason on this, because I don't think we can, in order to have a solution, you have to go to people who can actually solve the problem. The unions are never going to solve the problem because the police unions are under the thumb of politicians. In order to solve this problem, the people are going to have to make it known to the legislators, to the governors, to the mayors that they're not going to stand for it anymore. And the Republican Party, I put more blame on them than I do the Democrats for allowing this stuff to happen and placating the left. They don't do anything to stand against the left. They just stop after they voice their opinion. They stop and there's no action.
So would you say we need more businesses like what's happening in Baltimore to stand up and say, hey, we're not going to pay our taxes till you give us more policing?
I don't know what they need to do, but they need to start doing something organized to show that they're the victims. They're not people. The politicians on the right are not doing anything. The labor unions in the police department, they are hamstrung because of contracts and they want to get paid. But people have to realize, in order to make changes, they cannot wait on the left to do it. They can't wait on anybody that has anything to do with politics unless they put the pressure on the politicians. And you can do that to your legislators, your mayors, and the people that are in the right positions to make a change. You can do that if the people get together.
Commissioner, I'll give you 30 seconds to respond here.
Yeah, I'll just say that there are unions in big cities in America that are not focused so much on compensation right now. They're focused on preserving the integrity of the profession, the policing profession, that has helped really hold people who would commit crimes accountable for many, many years. They need to do a better job at it. I would agree with that, but I do think that it's uniquely within their purview. The citizens should be speaking out. Business owners should be speaking out. Civic leaders should be speaking out. But you don't see so much of that in the cities. I think it's a public education campaign. It will not be led by the law enforcement agencies themselves. It should be led by grassroots nonprofit organizations and by the organizations that represent the cops. After all, the cops are being harmed as much as the communities they serve by these policies.
Yeah, unfortunately. Gentlemen, it's so great to have you here. This has been a helpful discussion. We need to have more of them and get this word out. Appreciate you being here tonight.
Got it.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.